India says its energy priority is the interest of its citizens after US President Donald Trump said New Delhi had promised it will stop buying Russian oil. New Delhi has neither confirmed nor denied it was shifting its policy towards Russia. Mr. Trump's remarks come just days after Washington's new ambassador to India met with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The US had punished India with 25% tariffs on its exports, on top of another 25%, as part of the administration's so-called reciprocal duties due to its purchases of Russian oil. But New Delhi insists its purchases have helped keep global crude prices stable. Western sanctions had triggered discounts on Russian crude, helping Indian refiners save billions of dollars on import costs, keeping domestic fuel prices relatively stable. India, one of the world's largest crude oil importers, relies on foreign suppliers for more than 85% of its oil needs. Russia being India's top oil supplier after the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Now, India also sources crude oil from the Middle East, mainly Iraq and Saudi Arabia. And to explain the evolving situation, Ishan Garg is covering this story for CNA live from New Delhi. Now, Ishan, what signal is the Indian government sending in its reaction to Mr. Trump's remarks?
Well, if we look at President Donald Trump's remarks in basically two parts, he's said two things: that he's held a phone call. He said he's spoken to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and that India has assured him that it's going to cut its supply of Russian oil. Now, India's foreign ministry has come out in a press briefing to say that there hasn't been a telephonic conversation between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump at all, which clearly contradicts the first part of that statement. As for the second part, whether India is trimming its supply of Russian oil, India's foreign ministry has issued a statement which doesn't directly talk about this particular issue, but it does say that India is looking at broad basing its supply of oil. It says that India is a big purchaser of its energy requirements from abroad, and it also hints at the fact that there are ongoing negotiations between India and the US for India to potentially buy more oil from the United States. Now, if India does do that, it will signal essentially that India is looking to cut its trade deficit with the US, buying more stuff from the US, which has been a big complaint of President Donald Trump, that India doesn't buy enough from the US and supplies a lot more. So if India does cut down its Russia oil purchases and also purchases more from the US, it could significantly impact the possibility of the 50% tariffs on India, hopefully helping it come down. But so far, India says that it is procuring oil based on its need to secure energy for its 1.4 billion people, and also sending the signal that if it does cut down its purchases from Russia, it potentially would not be because of US pressure, but India says it would be because of its own economics of pricing of oil.
And speaking of which, Ishan, what would a halt in Indian purchases of Russian oil actually mean for the country's energy supplies then?
Well, in the short term, it could be a huge shock for the oil markets, because since the war in Ukraine started and Russia was hit by Western sanctions, India has been purchasing Russian crude oil at steeply discounted rates. The amount of oil purchase has risen to a peak of about 2 to 2.2 million barrels per day. But now reports say that that number has come down to close to 1.5 million barrels per day. And we've seen some changes in procurement patterns also, with Indian state refiners bringing down their quota of purchases from Russia, while private refiners bringing that number back up once again. But because India's oil demands are met mostly by imports, roughly 80% of India's oil demands are met by imported oil, it could mean a huge price shift for companies, and that price shift could impact consumers down the line as well. But analysts that we've spoken to here say that it really depends on how India chooses to procure its oil. If it increases its purchases from Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia and Iraq, it could certainly mean that its energy needs might be secured. But for the consumers, it could mean a price shock in the short term. However, these shocks are likely to get ironed out in the long term. That's what the analysts have been telling us.
Ishan, thank you for breaking all that down for us. Ishan Garg covering this story for CNA Live from New Delhi.